Albania's government has an ambitious plan to become the first truly cashless society by 2030. But this is a nation of people who historically have very little trust in banks to keep their money safe. And there's a huge informal economy. So, are Albanians really ready to give up their cold, hard cash? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, by the end of this decade, Albania's Prime Minister, Edi Rama, wants every financial transaction within the country to be digital. On the one hand, the aim is to drag the country into the future, but authorities also want to bring a huge, dark economy above board and into the light. Persuading the public this is in their best interests may be the hardest part of all.
In Albania, the phrase cash is king still rules daily life. It's known as a nation that likes to stuff cash under the mattress rather than in banks. But that could all change by 2030, as Prime Minister Edi Rama has set an ambitious goal to transform Albania into the world's first truly cashless society. His centre-left government wants to free Albania from its informal economy that makes up an estimated 29 to 33% of GDP, according to the International Monetary Fund. A recent survey suggests only about 34% of Albanians trust banks, and the World Bank reports that less than 50% have a bank account. The government wants to integrate Albania into the single euro payments area, a payment system that standardises euro payments across participating EU countries. Albanian banks and MasterCard started a programme to give small businesses free card machines to help more people pay digitally. The Bank of Albania says the country's booming tourism has significantly increased the use of card payments. 8.85 million card payments were made between January to June 2025, marking a 41% increase compared to the same period last year. The country's preference for cash is not surprising, given Albanians saw their savings wiped out in the 1990s thanks to a wave of pyramid schemes collapsing, leading to mass protests and civil unrest. So are Albanians really ready to abandon the safety of cash to go digital?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining me here in the studio, we have Vicky Pryce. Vicky is Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research. In Vlor, in Albania, we have Selami Xhepa. He's Professor of Economic Science at the University of Tirana. In Burgas, in Bulgaria, Tsvetelina Kuzmanova. Tsvetelina is EU Sustainable Finance Policy Lead at the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And in London, we have Charlotte Wilson. Charlotte is Head of Enterprise and Strategic Sales at Checkpoint Software. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Let's go to Albania first. Selami, to you. We're told Albania is a nation famously distrustful of banks. How do Albanians feel about being told to go cashless?
Well, I think that maybe due to the legacy of the past, I think Albanians have had not so important and frequent relationship with the financial system in the country. So basically, the history of banking is the history of the last 3 decades of transition to a free market economy. And unfortunately, during this transition, there have been some bad episodes in terms of financial crisis and the collapse of pyramid schemes. So I think this has been basically one of the key factors which have impacted, the wide use of the banking system in general by Albanians. The second, so it's more a cultural thing. The second thing I think is related to the fact that banking services remain still very costly. So, in terms of tariffs and fees, and therefore I think this has been prohibiting, the speed at which people can use the new financial instruments, including credit cards, debit cards, and other digital instruments of payments. So, and the last thing is that due to the infrastructure bottlenecks, because Albanians have a large part of population living in the countryside on which banks cannot be accessible. So I think due to this infrastructure, due to the legacy or the cultural issues and the cost factors, and of course the other factor can be the general level of economic welfare of the population. So not many people, have got savings, so they use the financial system. Basically, this has been the key factors, which have impacted the use of the financial system by Albanians.
Thanks, Selami. Let's go to Tsvetelina. Give us your thoughts on a country going cashless, Tsvetelina. Is this the direction of travel we're seeing? This is the future?
Indeed, I do see this as the future and the direction of travel. Digital solutions and digital currencies, not only cashless digital payment services, but even the European Central Bank is currently exploring the digital euro as a central banking digital solution. So this is definitely, in some countries, we do see that trend. The important thing is to find really the balance between security and inclusion, and how this can work with the right strong financial system and financial system infrastructure. We do have some excellent examples in Europe as well. Nordic countries, especially Sweden, Norway, have been among the countries with the highest penetration of such digital solutions. They have the lowest percentage of cash circulation in the economy as percentage of the GDP. Interestingly enough, as of this year, we do see countries like Sweden and Norway backtracking a little bit and still insisting on preserving cash and the ATM services within the country. Different reasons for this, but especially in Sweden, it was very interesting to see this year in particular that there were calls by the Swedish Defense Ministry calling on the population on keeping at home in different denomination the currency in cash, just in case of crises, cyber attacks, outages. So I think there is an interesting balance that we see between cashless versus cash light society, but definitely the digital solutions is something that we do see as the trend going forward.
Thanks, Tsvetelina. Charlotte, to you. Tsvetelina just mentioned security. This is your area of expertise. What are your concerns about security of banking transactions and where we need to get to, a country like Albania needs to get to, if it is to go truly cashless?
Well, I think all the points that have been raised are all really relevant. And if you look back to times like COVID, that taught us that technology advancements can be made, including things like going cashless and doing credit card payments and click-to-touch pay. But I echo some of the same concerns. You've got the system failures that could potentially happen, and we've seen those since COVID. So even as recently as 2025, like this year, where we saw like Albanians was hit by an outage, by a cyber attack. We saw CrowdStrike have an unfortunate situation with an outage, and it impacted people's ability to pay. So that is one area of concern. The other thing I would say, the economic payment preference we have in the UK, I think is the right way that Tsvetelina just talked about. But having no alternative to revert back to cash is a problem. The very recent retail hacks, if you'll remember, very public. A lot of those retailers reverted to cash only and couldn't actually transact in an electronic format. That notwithstanding, then obviously the digital poverty and some areas of society that will really struggle in a cashless society. So I think there is a lot that we need to think about around backup plans if we're going to go purely electronic in all cases.
Thank you, Charlotte. Vicky, tell me what you think is at the heart of this, because Albania, more than 50% of the population do not have bank accounts. So you've got quite a murky economy there. Is tax revenue at the heart of this idea?
Well, yes, and there's a lot of money underground. It's not only Albania, of course, where that has been happening. We've seen what has been going on, for example, in places like Italy and Greece, where it's now obligatory to have receipts actually printed when you go and buy anything at all using cash or anything, of course. With cards, of course, it's much easier to track what's happened. With cash, it isn't. So at least more transparency on what happens in those various transactions allows the centre to know what perhaps you're earning and make some assumption and tax you accordingly. If you don't do that, then it all goes underground and you have no idea about who earns what, and therefore revenues to the government do not come in. So there is an element of that, doing something about the black economy, without any doubt. That's Albania. But of course, it is also that you can make quite an easy transition in terms of not having a bank account and actually moving to the digital worlds. I mean, that's been happening all over Africa, for example. So you can transfer money more easily and do your transactions when before you may have had to travel a long distance to do something, or you may even have had to prove where that money had been coming from. So there are some benefits to this. But I think, as we've been hearing, there are always the problems with that as well. So the electricity may not work, the internet may not work. You know, your phone that is actually now the main element in which, with which you can actually use and make transfers from one bank account to another, which is increasing very considerably in various countries, may simply not function. So in addition to all the other concerns, cybersecurity, I mean, that's a serious, serious problem. When you've seen all the attacks, it's not just the retail sector. If you look at the financial institutions, some 65% of them globally in 2024 were, in fact, subjected to cyber attacks. And if that happens and your account is simply inaccessible, then what do? You can't survive. So it's not just in terms of defense, wars, and so on, but it's also because you may find that there are bodies outside your own country or even within your own country who are quite willing to attack the system that's there. And I think to be able to have cash as well to cover yourself for that is absolutely crucially important.
You've been covering money for decades. Do you think this is the direction of travel now, that governments want to see all of us just going cashless, tap, tap, pay with your phone or a card?
Well, it's interesting you mention the governments, because yes, it is true, as we've been hearing, that a number of countries have looked at, and central banks, at the possibility of central bank digital currencies. That seems to be not so favourable right now. Certainly the Bank of England has already said it doesn't really see why that should happen, given that we're using cards so much and banks can easily come in and do various things. You've got the development of stable coins, so they can be immediately translated into the cash or the currency that they are dependent on. So loads of them are dollar denominated. You can use that if you want to. So it's so easy now to also make transactions across. There is no real reason why the central bank or government should intervene. And there are serious concerns about privacy as well. So if that doesn't happen, then it is the banks and other intermediaries that are going to be really involved in doing those transfers. And you can use your contactless to do all sorts of payments. So governments may not need to really get into this, because also we need the banks to carry on operating. You can't have everyone depending on the central bank with the digital currency there. And then what happens to the banks that are meant to get deposits and pay some interest and then lend on? So there are serious issues there. Yes, fine going cashless, but the implications for the whole financial system are really quite significant.
Huge. Thank you, Vicky. Selami, to you, some critics are saying that your Prime Minister, Edi Rama, would be far better off focusing on the cost of living, inflation, tackling corruption, and that this is just a distraction technique.
Well, I think that the idea falls within the priority of the government to lower the informality in the economy. So one of the theoretical recommendations for a country to lower the informality is by maybe, I think that we have to specify, not going through to a cashless economy and a cashless society, rather than to lower the use of cash in the economy. And I think there is a difference between the two. In my view, the idea is that we have to, or the Bank of Albania Monetary Authority has to go through from higher currency denominations. For example, Bank of Albania has issued currency which is the equivalent of 100 euro bills. So to go through these higher currency denominations to a much lower one. And the major impact will be that the authorities should limit the transactions based in cash, both by businesses and by the households. So by going through this, let's say, less use of currency, maybe, and the idea is to fight the informality. So it falls within the priority, but definitely I fully agree that if you go to a cashless economy, for example, one of the key motivations is to fight the crime, the criminal economy, to fight the corruption, because all the transactions will be can be traced, and therefore the major impact of a cashless society, a cashless economy, will go to the benefits will go to fight the corruption. But definitely, the Albanian economy has a much has also very tough priorities and other key challenges, as you said, in terms of improving the welfare of the people, fighting informality, fighting, controlling the high, very high inflation and the very high prices, improving the business environment, and so on. But still, even this goal, I think, falls within the priorities of the society. Don't forget, in Albania, informality counts for about a third of total economic activity, and in some sectors of the economy is even higher. Informality on the labor market and underreporting of wages and salaries, which impacts, the pension and all the other incomes of the social security, and therefore it does not enable, to increase, to have a more welfare society and other programs which go to for the poor.
Thanks, Selami. Tsvetelina, you're talking to us from your home country of Bulgaria. You're normally in Brussels when we speak. What's the view in Brussels about this? Do you think this is a priority for EU leadership?
Especially when it comes to Albania, it is a country currently in conversation for European membership accession, and the banking stability and financial stability, the banking system is quite an important element there. And in fact, financial services is one of the area where European Union has recently acknowledged some progress when it comes to Albania, but still with a lot of serious gaps remaining around the whole infrastructure and the banking system. But because of this and in its accession for the European Union, which, by the way, the talks are meant to be concluded by 2027, and the country to become member, at least that's the timeline, for 2030. The expectation is that now through that, Albania has become a member of Xhepa, the single euro payment area. It is very important, I find, because a lot of the remittances in Albania are actually kept in cash and in euro, precisely because of this distrust in the financial system in Albania. So I do see a lot of benefits also in that sense, that this will enable the digital payments more and will also lower the costs, because I was very surprised to see, well, first of all, a large percentage of Albania lives outside of the country, over 40%, and over 20% of households in the country rely on these financial flows. And the costs are incredibly high, much higher than in other countries. So it's easily 8-9% of additional costs for transferring the money. So it is not surprised that countries, that people prefer to keep the money in cash and in euro as well. So I do see in that conversation around Albanian accession conversation that this will be an important step also to strengthen the financial infrastructure in the country, and also to go forward with more transparency. Ideally, this will help with building trust in the system, lowering the costs, obviously. But I do see also a lot of space for alternative digital solution and alternative fintech solutions. So for instance, in Europe, especially for payment services, we do have big companies like Klarna in Sweden, N26 in Germany. We have Revolut and others similar digital solutions. So I do see in the case of Albania specifically that this could be also an important and interesting alternative that can also help with additional financial literacy and additional uptake within the economy.
I want to bring Charlotte in on that. Tsvetelina just mentioned some fintech companies that are now very well-known apps, Charlotte. Are we looking at a situation where those names Tsvetelina mentioned may start replacing banks in the future?
Well, I think for a lot of people, some of those institutions are already replacing traditional banks. Revolut is a good example of a banking option that is just a viable option as much as any traditional bank might be. So I think they already are to some degree. But the responsibility to keep then the customer and the citizen protected relies on that bank and that banking infrastructure and the investment that they make in their systems and in their cybersecurity protection and defences, alongside what that citizen then does to protect themselves. And I just worry a little bit if you go fully cashless, the responsibility for keeping protection is now very squarely the organisations. It becomes a criminal. It's still a crime, but it's although you get away from some of the cash-related crimes, you get into a very technology-related crime. I also wonder if a country is to go wholly economic payment system, whether you make yourself more of a target for a nation-state attack, because the criminals that act as hackers will look for the easiest possible way to affect their outcome. So if you have an alternative, you become a primary target, I would have said.
And Charlotte, do you think, in your experience, that the fintech system, financial technology, is robust enough right now to withstand what will undoubtedly be organised crime groups coming after it?
I think the fact that we've seen within the last few months, we've seen an 11% increase of overall cyber attacks just year on year globally, would tell you that even with some of the most robust processes and the most robust practices, no one is fully exempt from this being an issue for them. The customers, including fintech customers that we have, they are the victims of crime in exactly the same way of any of us are. And so they're not exempt. I just feel like it puts a lot more responsibility onto them.
Thank you, Charlotte. Vicky, to you, how difficult is it to rebuild trust in banking? As we heard from Selami, a lot of Albanians, for lots of reasons historically, don't trust the banks.
Well, it's interesting because it varies from country to country. There has been a survey which I looked at, which asked about 14,000 people across 14 countries or something. It was quite large. Which asked, what do you trust generally? So they looked at social media, newspapers, politicians, etc. Interestingly enough, the banks came up quite high. In fact, surprisingly high for me. So it varies, as I said. Albania, obviously, they've been through a lot of problems, and we've all had the financial crisis and so on. But if you actually look still at where people put their money, yes, of course, they are now moving towards more fintech and so on. They still have this trust. And the interesting thing is that this trust continues, even though you do get hacked as an individual. And again, another survey showed that the places where there are more hacks, so you do lose money because people use your card, your contactless card, if you moved into cashless payments, is in Scandinavian countries. In fact, Denmark comes up right at the top.
For hacking?
For hacking, because they use contactless a lot more than others. And yet, they carry on. Of course, as I said, they move into some, they use different cards and they move into fintech and so on. But the banks are still very, very important. What's happened in the UK, and the reason why there's been a bit of a move, as we've been hearing, towards other financial institutions, is that the bank branches are disappearing. So, yeah. and that's really a serious problem. I mean, we've heard it also in Albania, but when you don't have access to the banks, you do something else. But that is an issue. It also reduces a little bit the importance of banks as a lending institution, perhaps, or someone so that trust that I mentioned may well disappear or really fall if you don't have access to them, if you don't have daily contact, if there isn't anyone even on the business side with a corporate capability to look at your business and help you. So there is a trend. On that point,
I've actually felt the last couple of years, certainly in the UK, as if banks don't want customers. They're closing their physical properties, they're driving people onto apps and online, and they don't want you.
Well, it's interesting because you asked me a question earlier about what the government wants to see happen. But actually, it's the private sector that's been moving in that direction in a big way. And the regulators have allowed that to happen. So I think it needs to be rethought because it leaves loads of people exposed.
Thank you, Vicky. Final point to you, Selami in Tirana. Just tell me, do you have confidence in Edi Rama getting this over the line, making it happen?
Well, I don't think that Albania is very well prepared, to make this very big and fundamental change, given that the dynamics of the increase in terms of electronic payments during the last decade have been very, very modest. Still, we have more than 60% of the economy that is based in cash, and the amount of cash that circulates outside the banking system, is about close to 72% of the base money, which means that we're a very intensive use of cash. And on the other hand, given the important investments that are needed in terms of digital infrastructure to guarantee the integrity of the process and to guarantee the security of the process and the privacy, I mean, there are so many things to be changed. And when you look on the government paper, I think government paper does not intend, to go to a cashless society rather than to lower the volume of transactions that the consumers can make on the shops or on the transactions from the business part. So it will be a long way, and definitely it needs a very strong participation from the Bank of Albania to lead the process rather than the government.
Thank you, Selami, and to Tsvetelina, Charlotte, and Vicky Pryce here in the studio as well. Fascinating stuff. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me and Brady and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.